أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another one of our Mizan live sessions. I hope that everyone is doing well. Where we are in the United States, it is spring break right now. I don't know, we might have audience from other places in the world, so it may not be spring break for you guys. But I hope that those who are having their breaks, they are relaxing and inshallah having a great break. As you know, we were covering the rulings and the secrets of Salat. Today, inshallah, will be the third session that we will be discussing this topic. In the past couple of sessions, I've explained already that our goal in these sessions was not just to have the rulings of prayer, but also to go through some of the secrets and some of the symbols, or what different parts of Salat stand for, some of the secrets of Salat, as well as some of the etiquettes of praying as well. In the previous sessions, we started all the way from Niyat and Takbiratul Ihram, and we covered qiyam last time, and we also covered the rulings that have to do with qira'at, in the first and second rakas, the Suratul Fatiha and the surah that is to be recited. And we also we started going into a little bit about the philosophy of why it is that you have to recite Quran in every salat, and also the philosophy of Tasbeehatul Arba'a and why it's 4 and things of that nature. We didn't get a chance to go into that. So today, inshallah, I'm going to do a quick review of what we did in our previous session, and then that's where we'll continue our discussion. The secrets behind Qira'at, the secrets behind Tasbihatul Arba'a, and what they symbolize and what they stand for. So, assalamu alaikum to everybody that's with us. Very nice to have you guys with us. It does feel a little different, I have to say, to do a Mizan live during the day. That's definitely something that's very different for me. But hopefully it's a good change. I mean, it's not a change we had much to, we couldn't do much about it. It just feels different, right? As the day was going on today, I thought, well, we still have time left till the session, just because you're going based off of, the sun. Turns out, no, 7 o'clock is sooner than you would assume, because of the daytime savings and all the changes that we have for that. Anyways, let me do a quick review. Inshallah, we'll continue with our discussion. So we started with qiyam. We said there are 4 different qiyams in salat. We said it's important to remember all of these different qiyams as separate duties that we have. And the reason why all 4 of these are important, or to basically differentiate between these 4 is important, is because there will be times where you're able to do one of them and you're not able to do the other one. And if you know that each of one of these is a duty in and of itself, then you know that even if you can do 2 out of these 4, you would have to do 2 out of these 4. If you can do 1 out of these 4, you have to do that 1 out of those 4, right? It was interesting. Someone just contacted me today, and they were asking about getting on a flight, for example, right? And obviously it was an airline that wouldn't allow you to just get up and pray normally. So what are you supposed to do? Then this ruling would come into play, because there are 4 different qiyams. You know that whichever one of these qiyams that you are allowed to do, you would have to do that, right? So what are those 4 different qiyams? And I'll explain the answer to that question just a little bit to clarify it a little bit. But these 4 different qiyams is: one, while you're doing Takbiratul Ihram; second one is while you're doing your qira'at, whether it be in the first and second rakat or the third and fourth rakat; the one before going to ruku; and the one getting up from ruku. So if I can just stand up and say Takbiratul Ihram, and then I have to sit down in the plane, for example, I have to get up for that first Takbiratul Ihram, because they're separate duties. Okay. Then we said that obviously part of qiyam, and this is something that the fuqaha and the scholars, they have they look at, in many different parts of salat, they will look at the concept itself. So when they look at the concept of qiyam itself, they say qiyam means you stand up by yourself, which means you're not allowed to be leaning on anything, right? So you're not allowed to lean on anything when you are doing your qiyam. You also cannot have your feet moving around or not on the ground, basically. Where are they getting this from? I don't even think we have particular hadith about. Fuqaha are looking at the concept of qiyam. They're saying when someone does qiyam, what does that mean, right? In the common sense, what's understood by the concept from the concept of qiyam. And then yes, if you have hadith about certain details, then you add that. But when the Prophet says you have to do qiyam, then you look at the concept itself, and then you see if hadith has any more details to it. So these are some of the details I believe that they have understood just from looking at the concept of qiyam itself. So the feet moving around and stuff like that, that's fine as long as you stop your your qira'at. But while you're doing qira'at, the feet have to be on the ground. Then we said that we went through some of the mustahabbat of qiyam. I'm not going to go through the hadith of the 8th Imam al-Rida salawatullahi alayhi, which we covered last time. But he went through a number of details, and that was a very beautiful hadith. But some of the mustahabbat is, number one, you have to stand straight, in the sense that it's better not to lean on the right foot or the left foot. That when men stand, their feet can be a little bit more open. For women, it's mustahab for their feet to be almost touching one another. And it's also in that hadith that we mentioned, there was a lot of emphasis on there being as little movement as possible. So the Imam mentioned scratching, he mentioned وَلَا تَعْبَثْ بِلِحْيَتِكَ. I remember that one because I'm guilty of that one. He mentioned وَلَا تُفَرْقِعْ أَصَابِعَكَ. Don't break your knuckles, based on what the translations were saying. And basically any type of movement that would distract you from who you are speaking to and understanding the importance of what's taking place in front of you. So those were some of the mustahabbat of qiyam. We explained that the philosophy behind qiyam and what qiyam symbolizes is basically a number of things that they had mentioned. Number one was standing in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we will do on the Day of Judgment. As the verses of the Quran say, يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الرُّوحُ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ صَفًّا. Everyone is standing there. لَا يَتَكَلَّمُونَ. No one is speaking. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking. And no one gets a right to say anything unless he وَقَالَ صَوَابًا, unless he says things that are truthful. So this idea that everyone gets together on the Day of Judgment, they stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be, for them to be held accountable. Some say qiyam is a symbol for that. Some say it's a symbol for resisting difficulties and doing muqawamah, as we say, right? Because the verses of the Quran speak of this idea of muqawamat and istiqamat as a very lofty and valuable concept, basically, right? So verses of the Quran say, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, I can't remember the exact wording of the verse. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا. Those who say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our Lord, ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا, and then they show istiqamat, تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. These malaika come to them and give them glad tidings, basically. So some say qiyam is a symbol of standing up and resisting the difficulties that someone is going to be dealing with. So that was qiyam. We moved on from qiyam, we moved on to hamd and surah in the first and second rak'ah, and the tasbihatul arba'a in the third and fourth rak'ah. So I'm just gonna cover, review some of the rulings we discussed with regards to these two, and we'll move on very quickly. So first thing that we mentioned was that some surahs, they're supposed to be recited together. There's a discussion as to whether these surahs are separate surahs or they're surahs, put together. So Suratul Duha and Suratul Inshirah, they are like that. And Surah Fil and Surah Quraysh are also like that. Now, amongst different maraji, some will have fatwas, some will have ihtiyat wajib. I believe Ayatul Sistani has ihtiyat wajib here. We said that you can skip over the surah if you're running out of time. You can change surahs before you've reached the middle of the surah, except for Surah Ikhlas and Surah Kafirun. In the third and fourth rak'ah, we said that you can recite Surah Fatiha or you can do tasbihat. That's a detail that a lot of people may not know, that in the third or fourth rak'ah, you can actually do Surah Fatiha, not the second surah, just Surah Fatiha, or you can do tasbihatul arba'a. And we also mentioned that only one tasbihatul arba is wajib. The three is it's mustahab, and the two is also mustahab. So only one is going to be wajib. Last couple of rulings. Number one, as it relates to the tajweed that someone is reciting the qira'at or hamdan surah with, there is, to put it very simply, the standards that the maraji have here, unlike what, contrary to common belief, is very, very, I shouldn't say very, very flexible, but pretty flexible, honestly, in the sense that they say, hey, just recite it like the Arabs do, right? So tajweed, the idea of tajweed is not part of the wajib recitation of salat, in the sense that if someone does not recite based on the rulings of tajweed, that doesn't mean their salat is a problem or anything like that, right? There has to be a discussion even as to where these rulings of tajweed came from exactly. So some of the details, I'd say there's a discussion as to where they even came from. The one thing I will mention is that the mad, particularly the mad in the word waladhalin at the end of Surah Al-Fatiha, from what I remember, that is something I can't say for sure whether it was a fatwa or is it ihtiyat wajib, that some of the maraji do consider it to be wajib to basically do the mad, right? So that's the only thing out of this tajweed that I think is really important. As for the makharij of the letters, as long as someone tries to do it like the Arabs are doing, then that should be fine. Yes, some letters you might have to practice a little bit, but then trying to, even when you speak to Arabs, sometimes they will tell you that sometimes some of these details that are mentioned in tajweed, they didn't even know about, right? So tajweed is its own science, basically. So sometimes it gets even more detailed than the way Arabs normally speak to one another and talk with one another. Yes, so you do have to pronounce different letters differently. You can, if someone is saying walazzalin instead of waladdallin, that is a problem. If that person knows that that's not how Suratul Hamd is to be recited. If someone didn't know and found out later, that's fine. But if someone did know, then that's going to be a problem. All right, so that's what we covered in the previous session. Take a quick look to see if we have any questions. Okay, no. So we'll move on to what we want to cover for today. So what we want to cover for today is basically a little bit of the philosophy behind reciting Quran in the first and second rak'ah. Basically, the question is, why is it that our imams have emphasized, well, not our imams, but Islam has emphasized that in the first and second rak'ah, you have to recite Surah Fatiha and you have to recite some other surah of the Quran. Why not say some other dhikr in this part of salat, right? We don't know too much about the reasoning behind this. What we do know is that the reason why this was so important was because of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted the Quran to be part of the fabric of the life of the Muslim. So hadith says, this one is from the 8th Imam, salawatullahi alayhi. He says, إِنَّمَا أُمِرَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِرَاءَةِ فِي الصَّلَاةِ لأن لا يكون القرآن مهجورا مطيعا. He says that the only reason why, the reason why the people have been commanded to recite Quran in their first and second rakahs, right? In salat, he means first, second rakah, is that the Quran would not become mahjur. Honestly, from what I've seen, this completely makes sense. Like if we did not have Surah Fatiha and another surah that we had to recite in salat, if it wasn't wajib, I honestly don't know if many of us would even learn like some of the surahs at the end of the 30th juz, or we would memorize any of them. وَلِيَكُونَ مَحْفُوظًا مَدْرُوسًا فَلَا يَضْمَحِلَّ وَلَا يُجْهَلْ, so that it would remain as if it is observed and it's studied, فَلَا يَضْمَحِلَّ وَلَا يُجْهَلْ, so that it wouldn't just go away and people would not be ignorant towards it, right? So that's the idea of reciting Quran in the beginning of, basically reciting Quran in every salat. You have to recite some sort of, Quran, right? Of course, in mustahab prayers, as we mentioned before, you don't have to recite surah, the second surah. You only have to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. But with regards to Surah Al-Fatiha in particular, it's beautiful. We have this hadith Qudsi. قال الله عز وجل قسمت الصلاة بيني وبين عبدي نصفين. I have divided salat between myself and my servant into two halves. One half of it is for him, one half of it is for me. And this is beautiful because it says that every verse or every phrase in Surah Al-Fatiha that a servant recites, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to that, right? فَإِذَا قَالَ الْعَبْدُ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ قَالَ اللَّهُ حَمَدَنِي عَبْدِي. Like when you say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, you praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reacts to that. He says, Hamadani Rabbi, Hamadani Abdi, my servant is praising me. Look at that, right? No one is an expert in giving small things attention like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. فإذا قال الرحمن الرحيم, when we say الرحمن الرحيم, قال الله أثنى علي عبدي. Look, my servant, he's speaking of me, he's speaking of my attributes, right? He's doing thana of me. فإذا قال مالك يوم الدين قال مجدني ربي, or forgive me, مجدني عبدي. My servant is now speaking of my majd and my majesty, right? وَإِذَا قَالَ إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ قَالَ هَذَا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ عَبْدِي. From this part of Salat onwards is the part that has to do with my abd. Now, the first half was my half. It was talking about me and my attributes. Now, this half is the half of my servant. قَالَ هَذَا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ عَبْدِي. What's being said is between me and my servant. وَلَعَبْدِي مَا سَأَلْ. And whatever he's going to ask me, I'm going to give him. Right? Because he said, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ. We ask you. We only ask you. So we're going to ask him for something. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before you ask him, he says, وَلَعَبْدِي مَا سَأَلْ. I'm going to give him whatever he's going to ask me. فَإِذَا قَالَ إِهْدِنَا الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ, all the way to وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ قَالَ هَذَا لَعَبْدِي وَلَعَبْدِي مَا سَأَلْ. Now that he's asked me for this, I'm going to grant him what he had asked me. And this is the two halves that the Hadith Qudsi is talking about. The first half is praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second half of Surah Al-Fatiha is speaking of the relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is, of course, just to highlight the importance of Surah Al-Fatiha. And of course, it's because of the importance and the weight that it carries that Hadith says, La salata illa bi fatihatil kitab. Famous hadith that the fuqaha always speak of, that there's no salat unless that there is Fatihatul Kitab in it, or Surah Al-Fatiha in it. So that's part of the reason why we do Surah Fatiha, or we do Quran, and that's why it's wajib. Moving on to the secrets of tasbihat. Why is it that we do tasbihatul arba'a? Why is it that we do these 4 tasbihat? What do these stand for? Hadith says, and this is going to take a little bit of explanation. Hadith says that these 4 basically symbolize the 4 sides of the Kaaba, or the 4 walls of the Kaaba, right? And then they say that they also symbolize the 4 sides of the Arsh, the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also the 4 sides of this thing called Baytul Ma'mur. Now, what is Baytul Ma'mur? There's a discussion about it. Baytul Ma'mur is something that the verses of the Quran speak about in Surah At-Tur, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالطُّورِ وَكِتَابٍ مَسْطُورٍ. Wat-Tur being the place where Prophet Musa alayhi salam received his first revelation. وَكِتَابٍ مَسْطُورٍ فِي رَقٍّ مَنْشُورٍ وَالْبَيْتِ الْمَعْمُورِ. And he swears by this al-bayt al-ma'mur. Okay, now we are not 100% sure what this Bayt al-Ma'mur is. Some say it's just the Kaaba. Some say no, it's another basically place of worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in the heavens, where angels go there and worship Him. Nonetheless, this Tasbihatul Arba'a that we have, it symbolizes the four sides of the Kaaba and the four sides of this Baytul Ma'mur that Ahadith say a little bit about, but we really don't know too much about. So that's the secret behind Tasbihatul Arba'a. I'm going to move on to the rulings of ruku' now. Okay. So the rulings of ruku'. Here, we're going to get back to the fiqhi side a little bit and discuss some of the detailed rulings. So first of all, obviously when we go to ruku', this is a question that I've had multiple people ask me, that when I go to ruku', do I have to bend down 90 degrees? The answer is no. It is not wajib for someone to bend down 90 degrees. It's only wajib to bow down or bend down enough that their hands can reach their knees. According to Ayat al-Sistani, you don't even have to have your hands on the knees. According to Ayat al-Khamni, he says, ihtiyat wajib, you should put your hands on your knees. So ruku' is basically bending down to that extent, basically. It's not even, according to Ayat al-Sistani, not even wajib to have your hands on your knees, right? So this is important. Why? Because according to Ayatollah Khamenei, if you're in ruku', then you have to have your hands on your knees, and you should, like when you're doing the dhikr, you should not be removing your hands from the knees, because the hands on the knees is part of ruku' based on his ruling, right? For Ayatollah Sistani, it's not like that. So if I have to scratch my face while I'm doing ruku', that's fine, right? Then he says, next ruling is that the dhikr in ruku', and actually we know, we're familiar, we say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim wa bihamdih, and we are praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah basically means God has no flaws. He has no negative attributes, right? He's perfect. I'm saying it in this way because, brothers and sisters, we fail, unfortunately, to simplify these concepts, to explain it to our children, right? Ask your average, Muslim child. He will have no idea what Subhanallah means. Why? Because every time we taught him what Subhanallah meant, we told him Subhanallah means I glorify you. Or for example, I forgot the other word that we use quite a bit for this. But what does glorifying mean? We need to break these down for our children, right? Subhanallah basically means that you are so great, you are you have no flaws. No one can point to any flaws in you. No one can point to any naqs, imperfections in you, right? So the dhikr of ruku' is, it's better to say that or say 3 subhanallahs. Funny thing is, you can actually say 3 Allahu Akbar, you can say 3 Alhamdulillah, you can say 3 other dhikr as well. It's not really just subhanallah. Question that comes up here a lot: if I mix up the dhikr between sajda and ruku', will that create a problem for my prayer? Absolutely not. As long as it's done unintentionally, that is not a problem. I think maybe even intentionally, I won't say that just to be safe, but unintentionally it's completely fine, because we mentioned before, when you do things unintentionally in salat, if you don't mess with the arkan, then your salat is fine. Here you're doing your ruku', so you're doing your rukn. You're just changing the dhikr unintentionally, so you're not messing with the arkan, and therefore your namaz is going to be completely fine. One ruling I'll mention before I take a look to see if we have any questions is this: if someone cannot do ruku' normally, then they have to lean on something while they are doing ruku'. If not, then they have to try to do it halfway, because we mentioned that for ruku' you're supposed to go down all the way till your hands could potentially touch your knees. But if someone can't do that, if they can just do it halfway, they have to do it that way. And then if they can't do that, then maybe they sit down and they are going to bend their head, basically. So there are stages to this. The reason why I emphasize on this is because a lot of times in our cultures we're taught that the moment you can't do something in salat normally, then you go and you sit with everyone else who's just praying while sitting down. And that's not how it is. We mentioned before that if someone can get up and do even a part of salat normally, right? Physically they're able to do that, then they have to do that before they sit down. If I can say takbiratul ihram standing up and then sit down, that's what I would have to do. So I'm about to go into some of the mustahabbat of ruku and also the philosophy behind ruku and what it symbolizes. But let me just take a quick look and see if we have any questions. Okay, no questions yet, so I'll continue inshallah. Moving on, some of the mustahabbat of ruku. First mustahab thing about ruku, and this will open up a little bit of a discussion for us, is that it is mustahab to say takbiratul ihram before you go to ruku. Okay, I am emphasizing this idea of before. Okay, so why is that? So we have the wajib takbir, which is the first takbir in prayer. We said the other takbirs are all mustahab. You don't have to worry about them if you skip them. But if someone is going to say those mustahab takbirs, and he's saying takbir with the intention that I am saying this takbir that has been prescribed for this particular time and place in prayer, which is like before ruku, or getting up from sajda, or going to sajda. If I say takbir with that intention, my body has to be calm. So you'll find that a lot of people will say those takbirat and their body is not calm. Like they're going to ruku and they say Allahu Akbar. That is a problem. You're not allowed to do that. If someone says takbir just with the intention of, I'm just saying dhikr in general, I'm not saying that takbir that the Imam said to say it like when you're gonna go to ruku, not that takbir. No, just a general takbir. You know, for all purposes, instead of takbir, I could have said alhamdulillah, or I could have said la ilaha illallah. That's why I'm saying takbir. If that's your intention, then you can say takbir even when your body is moving. So that's what differentiates between the two. But most people, they're saying takbir with the idea that this is those 7 takbirs that are mustahab in salat before going to ruku or going to sajda, getting up. If you're doing one of those, your body has to be calm while you're doing it. That's why Ayatul Sistani says before going to ruku you say takbir, because once you start moving towards ruku, your body is not calm anymore, right? And you're not allowed to say that takbir when your body is not calm. That takbir has been prescribed for when your body is calm. And this also applies to sajda. You'll see people getting up from sajda and going back to sajda, and they say the Allahu Akbar while they're doing all of this. No, if you're saying the takbir that's been prescribed for that particular time and place, your body has to be calm while you're doing it. Okay. Second thing that we'll mention here is that when this person goes to ruku, it's mustahab that his head is not just lying down, right? Or hanging down from his body. It's mustahab for him to extend his neck out. So basically his head and his body would make one line, right? Now, that has to do with the philosophy of ruku, which I will get to in just a second. Number 3 is it's mustahab to have your hands on your knees. We mentioned Ayatul Sistani doesn't even consider that wajib. He says that it's mustahab to have it, right? Number 4 is that it's mustahab to look between your 2 feet while you're in ruku. And for when someone is doing qiraat, they're doing Fatiha and Surah, it's mustahab to look at their turba. Next one is obviously you say Sami Allahu liman hamida when you're getting up, and obviously that's not wajib either. And that's pretty much it. What I have here. Oh, reciting salawat is the last one. Before ruku or after ruku, it is mustahab to recite salawat. Okay, so what is the philosophy behind ruku? Why is it that we do ruku in this way, and what does it symbolize? We have a short hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayhi. He says the reason why you are supposed to do ruku and the reason why it's mustahab for you to extend your neck outwards in ruku is this. He said, معناه آمنت بك ولو ضربت عنقي. Ya Allah, I believe in you. I'm willing to give away anything for you. وَلَوْ ضَرَبْتَ عُنُقِي. Even if, while I have my neck extended out like this, you were to remove my head. Right? Now, if you want to explain this to your child, you'll have to come up with a PG version of what I just said. You don't want to mention something like this. because they may not understand that God is not gonna, like, he's not that type of it's different with God. But this is what Imam Ali is saying, in the sense that you are in total servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you're extending your neck out, that even if you want this, willing to give it away. This is when he says. And ruku is especially important. This is why in the verses of the Quran, sometimes when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to say, go and pray, he will say, go and do ruku. Usually ruku is mentioned with sujood. Sujood is probably the most important part. Well, when I say the most important part, I should say the most, the biggest display of obedience, right? We should say it that way. But at second, it would probably be ruku, right? This is why hadith says from the sixth Imam, the sixth Imam used to say to his family and the women in the house, لا تقلن في ركوعكن وسجودكن أقل من 3 تسبيحات. Don't be in ruku and in sajda less than 3 tasbihs. This is one of the ahadith that's played a role in the fuqaha giving this opinion that when you're in ruku and your sajda, you have to say a dhikr at least the size of 3 subhanallahs, right? فَإِنَّكُنَّ إِن فَعَلْتُنَّ لَمْ يَكُنْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا مِنْكُنَّ. Because if you guys do this, you'll be the best for doing this. So this is the philosophy behind ruku. All right. Just want to check, see if we have any questions. And inshallah, we'll move on to sajda, because sajda is a topic that has a lot of questions that we need to cover. Sister Sharmeen is asking, where do women's hands need to be in ruku? As far as I know, sister, they can just put it on the knees, but I'm reading here, according to Ayat al-Sistani, he says it's mustahab for them to place it a little bit above their knees, right? But this is just mustahab. So on the knees is fine, above the knees would be mustahab to do. Okay. Moving on to sajda. Now the rulings for sajda are going to be a lot more compared to ruku, because ruku doesn't have too many rulings to cover, but sajda has quite a bit. So we know that in sajda, 7 parts of the body need to be on the ground. Obviously the forehead and the bottom of basically the palms, the 2 knees, and the tips of the toes, right? So one thing I want to clarify here is that for the palms, as long as someone puts their palm down, that's enough. Like from the common view, they have to say you put your hand on the ground. I've had questions, people saying, oh, what if the ground is like, it's rocky, or there's like a little bit of my hand is not on the ground? As long as you just put it normally on the ground, that's fine. It's not like every single part of your palm has to come into contact with like dirt on the ground, or I don't know, the carpet, right? That's that. With regards to the feet, only the toes is what is wajib. But you have to do the toes. You can't do anything other than the toes. Those are that ruling that I just mentioned. I've seen people make mistakes about that quite often. Okay, so those 7 parts go on the ground. Now, if someone wants to do sajda, and we're going to talk in just a minute about what are the things that you can do sajda on, right? What things can you use in order to do sajda? But before that, I want to explain this, that when someone is going to put their head on something and they're going to use it as turba, let's just take the dirt, which is the turbas that we use for now. There's no certain amount of your head that has to be on the turba. So the turba could be a bigger thing, it could be a smaller thing, doesn't matter. It could also be one of those things that is not all in one piece. It could be broken. I've had people ask this question. Growing up, I think one of our relatives used to tell us always that, no, don't do salat with a broken turba. That's like a problem. And from what I remember, it might be makruh in the sense that sajda has less thawab. But it's absolutely not a problem. It won't make the salat batil or anything like that. So when someone goes down to sajda, the only thing that matters is whatever it is that you're placing your head on, and we'll discuss what you can and cannot put your head on in just a second. The important thing is that from the common view, you're putting your head on something that people would say, hey, he's putting his head on dirt. right? So if it's that amount, then that's enough. Yes. If it's like one molecule, that doesn't count. But if it doesn't matter how big or small it is, as long as people say he put his head down on the turba. If the turba is small or big, that's fine. So if someone has a tasbeeh, for example, his tasbeeh is made up of dirt, right? Like the beads are made up of dirt. If they can make that into something like round and put their head on that, that will also count as something that they could do sajda on. And I'm sure that there are other examples that we can come up with. If I don't find a big rock, for example, but I find like 5 smaller rocks, you can put them together and you can do your sajda on that. That's not going to be a problem. Okay. Let me explain a little bit. Let me see. We covered this. Okay, yeah, let me explain this. What can we do sajda on? Okay, because I know that this is one of those issues that I'm personally growing up, I had a bunch of questions about this issue. What can we do sajda on? So, Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei's rulings in this regard are pretty much the same. There are some details that are different that I'll explain in just a second. They say you can basically do sajda on anything that grows from the earth, unless it's something that is worn. And when I say something that is worn, I mean either the final product or even the raw materials that there is a process that's going to be taking place on them to turn them into a final product. Either one of those. If it's something that people wear, you are not allowed to do sajda on it. So that's number one. So an example of that would be cotton, right? Cotton is something that is going to go into normally goes into something that people wear, right? So you're not allowed to do sajda on cotton, right? Now there's a very important exception to that. We'll get to that later on, inshallah. That's number one. Number two, things that people are going to eat. And this is regardless of whether this thing is raw right now or it's fried, or I don't know, it's cooked, or whatever the case may be. So certain leaves that people eat, you are not allowed to eat. You're allowed to eat them. You're not allowed to do sajda on them, right? And number three is certain minerals, like certain metals and like glass and plastic and things like that. So those three things you are not allowed to do sajda on. Outside of that, anything that grows from the earth or is comes from the earth is completely fine. All types of stones and rocks, even if they're used as zinat, is completely fine according to Ayatollah Sistani. You can do sajda on dirt, you can do it on grass, you can do it on leaves of trees that we don't consume those leaves. You can do it on the bark of trees sometimes, if you can do it on wood. All of those are allowed. You can do it on clay or dry clay, for example, or if you have like a vase, those vases that are made out of clay, they're a lot more prevalent in the Middle East than they are over here. But if you have one of those, that's fine, as long as if it's not colored. If it's colored, then that's a problem. So all of these are allowed. Now, two particular issues that I need to talk about is paper. Can you pray? Can you do sajda on paper? And number two is tissues, right? So for paper, Ayatollah Sistani has a small exception here. He says if this paper is made of, it's an exception that makes it easier, basically. He says paper, you're allowed to pray on it or do sajda on it if it's made of wood or straws of like, wheat or things of that nature. The straws we don't eat, basically. Even if it's made of cotton, he says it's okay. Only with regards to paper, not anything else. This is just a specific exception when it comes to paper. So for Ayatollah Sistani, you can pretty much pick up any paper and pray on it, right? Like do sajda on it, like the papers that we use, right? For tissues, he says no, it should not be a tissue that has cotton. So, and usually tissues are made of cotton as far as I know. So then tissues would naturally not be okay because cotton is something that people normally wear. It's wearable, basically, has the potential to be worn by people, so that wouldn't be allowed. Ayatollah Khamenei pretty much has the same rulings, except for paper. He says if it has cotton in it, it's not allowed, right? So for paper and tissue, he says if it's made of something that you can normally do sajda on, completely fine. If it's not like that, then it's not going to be allowed. I'm going to move on in just a second to what are you supposed to do if you're in the middle of your prayer and all of a sudden your torba is not there. Like you might have kids around who pick up your torba, or your torba was a piece of paper and wind just came and blew and took your torba away, right? Or whatever you're going to do sajda on. We're going to discuss that in just a second. Sister Sharmeen is asking if we are reading the translation of Quran, do we have to do the sajda on the ayats it is wajib or mustahab to do them on? As far as I know, that would not be wajib. I think I was actually taking a look at this. Yeah, right here. Let me just take a quick look at this right now because the book in front of me is actually open right in front of me. Yeah, I can't find anything that it says over here right now, but as far as I know, that would only be the Arabic. Okay. Sister Tayyiba is asking, when you say stay calm when you are saying Allahu Akbar before the ruku, do you mean no movement of the body? Do you have to raise your hands towards your ears, palms out? Yes. So when we say your body has to be calm, we're talking about your body. The movement of the hands are fine. It's mustahab for the hands to move. It's not wajib. So when someone says Allahu Akbar and then they go to ruku, they're actually doing two mustahabs. They're saying the takbir, and number two, they're raising their hands when they're saying the takbir as well. That's two mustahabs. But the hands, as a general principle, hands do not create a problem if they're moving around in salat. In the sense of keeping your body calm, hands do not fall under that category. So that's fine. Yes, you can't move your hands like when you're in sajda because your hands are supposed to be, that's part of sajda, not just keeping your body calm. So hopefully that answers your question, Sister Tayyiba. Sister Hiba is asking, can you refresh our memory if sajda is allowed on asphalt and or concrete? Yes. So that's what I'm going to get into in just a second. And we just have 3-4 minutes left. So if you guys have any questions, make sure you send them in in the next couple of minutes, because we will be ending inshallah 2-3 minutes. So let's move on to that. If I am in the middle of prayer and then all of a sudden I look around and I don't have anything to do sajda on, it's one of those situations that we talked about before, that maybe you have children in the house, maybe wind just blew, maybe you picked up a tissue or whatever, and then you found out it's made of cotton, right? And you can't pray on it or you can't do sajda on it, whatever the case may be. So Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei have different rulings in this regard, and the rulings are drastically different. But before I explain that, one thing that is understood is that when we say you don't have anything to do sajda on, we are talking about situations where you cannot stop your prayer and walk and grab something that you would be able to do sajda on. So what does that mean? If I'm in my qira'at, right, first or second rak'ah, and I see that, oh, my torba is not there, I can stop my qira'at and walk 2 steps back or forward or to the left or the right, or 3 or 4 steps, or whatever the case may be, to then have access to something that I could do sajda on, right? Yes, you can't walk too much that people would see you and say, oh, this guy's not praying. He's like walking around in the middle of his prayer. You can't walk that much. But a couple of steps here or there in whatever direction it is fine. You have to keep your face towards the qibla and all that stuff. So that's one principle. Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei, they both have that. If that's not possible, now these rulings that we're explaining come into play. So Ayatollah Sistani says, if you don't have that, option, then what you would have to do is, if you have asphalt nearby, then you would have to pray on that asphalt. I don't know if the sister was mentioned concrete. So this does not apply to concrete. This is only asphalt. Concrete does not have that ruling, right? And then he says, if you can't find that, then anything that you pray with is fine, right? So this idea that people have that you can do sajda on the back of your thumb, no, at least Ayatollah Sistani does not believe in that, right? Okay, so Find asphalt. If you can't, then pray on anything. Ayatollah Khamenei, on the other hand, he says this. He says, if you have time for your prayer, then you have to break your salat. Let's say I have another half hour left before the time of salat becomes qada. I have to break my salat and I have to start all over again. Right? That's what he says. He says if you don't have the time to break your salat, then if you have cotton in your clothes, you're going to use your clothes to do sajda. Otherwise, ihtiyat wajib, you're going to do sajda on the back of your hand. Or basically back of your hand, basically. So that's what you're supposed to do if you don't have anything to do sajda on, which is drastically different from growing up. What I was taught was something completely different. Sister Taiba is asking, what about your aqiq ring? Very good point, Sister Taiba. Yes, you can do sajda on your aqiq ring. That is a good point, because you are allowed to do sajda on any types of rocks and stones. So if you can manage to do sajda on your aqiq ring, then you should do that. I guess that's a really good excuse for us to go out and say, hey, I have to buy a ring now because in the middle of salat I have to use it for my turba or whatever. But yeah, any type of stones, and I think this is one of those rulings. I think that the ruling of Ayatollah Sistani may have changed on, or maybe even Ayatollah Khamenei, because I remember reading before that they had an issue with stones that were used as zinat. But I checked today and they say any types of stones, whether it be for zinat or non-zinat, is fine. If you're praying in the haram, for example, and they have stones in the courtyard, right, like at the bottom, then you can just do sajda on those, and that would be your turba. All right, thank you very much for being with us. I believe it's just about time of namaz right now for us. Inshallah, I think next week, next session, I won't be with you guys just because Rajab and Sha'ban is getting a little busy, and the month of Ramadan is coming up. I have to do some preparation for that, inshallah. I believe Shaykh Amin is going to be with you guys tomorrow with the continuation of his discussion. And we will be having sessions specifically for the month of Ramadan, like we did last year in the month of Ramadan. We're still trying to figure out the details, but inshallah the flyer for that will come out, and hopefully we'll have all of you guys with us as we go through those discussions during the month of Ramadan. Looking forward to that, inshallah. Thank you very much for being with us. Inshallah, see you guys in our next session. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.